what you're talking about there, and I understand that the gentleman that come up here tonight, and I appreciate him being here and saying that, and what we're talking about there, and I know exactly what he's talking about, is what at one time the mascot was a Raider. I mean, what you call, I guess you call a Confederate general at one time, and what he was talking about there. And the time he was talking about as far as the emblem that was out there on the Student Center, in 1975, I believe, is when that emblem was removed. And when this come up today, we had an email or two that have come through on this in question of the Raider name and where that comes from in the Blue Raider. Well, I became interested in that, and I know you may want me to come up there to do it rather than me stand here and trying to look at everybody looking at my back or whatever. But I spent the last 2 days out there trying to figure this out. Why has the term Blue Raider remained so long, and why it has been a part of where everything else may have changed, and why everything else has been moved, why everything else has been taken away. And we tried to do that. So I went back to try to locate that, and I did. And I wanted to know where it come from, where the terminology Blue Raider come from. And it's not where you think it would have come from, not whatsoever, where it did come from. Well, you got to remember, it has not always been MTSU or Middle Tennessee State University or Middle Tennessee State College. It began as normal, the normal school. It began as the Teachers College. It began in 1911, and in 1911, the president of the college decided that the school needed colors, the school colors, like any other school would. And 2 ladies were placed as a committee to come up with colors. I was reading in the history of the first 50 years. I went over to the university. I went to the Alumni Hall. We contacted the Al Gore Senior Research Center. And if any of you have not been to that center, you can go there and find just about anything you need to know about Middle Tennessee in this area, in the history area. And we found there the book that deals with the first 50 years of this university. And we also found the sidelines. And any of you that have been a student out there, you'll remember the sidelines. And anything known to a student or possibly known to man was in the sidelines. And that's the student newspaper. I found the 1960 sidelines where it talks about where did the Blue Raider come from. I found the 1975 sidelines that also gives the same history of where did the Blue Raider come from. And so happens the book from the first 50 years, the study from the 2 sidelines papers, all tell the exact same story. And different writers for each one of them. So if you'll allow me, I'm going to say, let you know from the first 50 years, it's easier to do this. And this also comes from Mr. Homer Pittard. If any of you remember Mr. Homer Pittard, who also served on this commission and was a county historian and who was at MTSU, has this history. And it seems like the Teachers College, back in the early part when football was first coming around from a lot of our schools, the football team out there at Normal was having a tough time. And when I mean tough time, they wasn't winning anything. And they were finally getting a team, but you know what was happening to them? They were running into a situation of people coming to their games and cheering for them. And I'll just read you this brief section and what it comes to here. After a very tough season, the following season was more successful, relative speaking, with a record of 4 games won and 5 games lost. The late fall of 1934, near the close of the season, the local newspaper, the Daily News Journal, initiated a contest to select a nickname for the college athletic teams. Strangely enough, over 23 years had passed since the opening of the Normal, and yet no accepted rallying symbol had been chosen. Old Normal, Mid-State, pedagogues, state teachers, and many other designations had passed through successive student bodies into oblivion. Pedagogues, if any of you don't know what a pedagogue is, that's a schoolmaster. And they threw that one out due to the fact nobody could spell it. And I understand that. As a result of the move by the Daily News Journal, over 240 entries were submitted. Many were extremely appropriate, while others were somewhat uncomplimentary, considering dismissal seasons of the immediate past. Final choice was left to the football team and the entry Blue Raiders suggested by Charles Sarver. The guard on the 1934 teams appeared to be the most appropriate. Sarver's inspiration for Raiders came from the Red Raiders of Colgate in New York, and the blue is obvious. The Daily News Journal concluded the contest in these words. Now, Mr. Reporter back here, this is what your paper said. The name Blue Raiders will well suit the teachers' boys as their colors are blue and white. Since time began, the local team has been nameless, but now, with the inspiration of a new name, they are expected to go places. They will use the new name in the Thanksgiving game, which brings the season to a close. The newborn nickname may or may not have been advantageous in the final game against Tennessee Polytech Institute. According to the viewpoint taken by the Raiders, were defeated 12-0. Or to express it in another way, they lost by only 12 points. So as you see there, and as it says in these other newspapers that I pulled from the research center over there, the name Blue Raiders came from Colgate in New York State. They were the Red Raiders, and if you'll go back and research that team, it was some more team. It was a very impressive team. So we have been the Blue Raiders at MTSU since 1934. Had nothing whatsoever at that time when this contest come around that dealt with the conflict of the 1860s. Now, as it went on, some individuals come up with the idea of using that. But in 1975, it was taken off all the buildings. It's no longer used in anything else we do out there. But you know, Blue Raiders is on all of our athletic teams out there. And if you turned on the radio tonight and listened to sports talk, that's all they've talked about tonight. They've interviewed from New Orleans, where now 85 of our MTSU Blue Raiders are down there ready to play in the New Orleans Bowl. They'll be on ESPN Saturday night at 8 o'clock representing this town, this county, and that university out there nationwide. Now, you know, that's what I've always known them as. And I understand your concerns and what you say there. But as that is known right there, and the reason we said Blue Raiders, we think everybody recognizes when you say that in this mid-state area, they think of Middle Tennessee State University, because that's what we are, and that's who we are. But I want to tell you, when I think of Blue Raiders, I think of something much more. I've seen my Blue Raiders over here at Special Kids, helping a child tie their shoes who couldn't tie their shoes. My Blue Raiders, along with some of you other commissioners, I've seen them at the Special Olympics out here. I've seen our star quarterback standing there taking a ball, throwing to a child sitting in a wheelchair and throwing it back. I've seen our Blue Raiders involved in so many things in this community, helping the needy, helping those others in so many different ways, that the term Blue Raiders come to me, and I think others, due to the fact of what they do and what they give back and what they mean. I'm at every game they're at, basketball, football, whatever, and I want to tell you a specific thing that it means to me. I attend their basketball games, and this year we're sort of like what this is said back in 1934. Their season hasn't been that good. But every year I buy a line of season tickets for my grandchildren, and I've got a 3-year-old that no matter what they do on that floor, when those boys come off of that floor and they go to that dressing room, they stand outside and they wait for the children to come, because that 3-year-old goes down that alley and looks for those Blue Raiders, because they throw their arms out and pick up those children and hold them up and hug them. That's the Blue Raiders I see, and that's what I see, that's what I understand. That's our university. That's their fight song, that's their spirit, and that's what it recognizes to me. And that's what I see when we're putting that up there. So what I'm telling you is what history tells us, and I've always heard that if you know history and study history, you won't repeat it, and that's what I'm trying to say right here, and that's where it comes from, Commissioner. I may have told you more than what you wanted to know.
No, sir, thank you. I appreciate that. That was very